Listen here, friend. Before I tell you what happened on that stretch of Route 66 outside Oklahoma City, I need you to ask yourself something real important. When's the last time you called your family? Not texted, not sent some emoji, actually picked up that phone and heard their voice? Because what I'm about to share with you, well, it's going to make you think twice about taking family for granted. My name's Jake Morrison, and I've been pushing 18 wheels down America's highways for 23 years, seen more sunrises through a windshield than most folks see in a lifetime. But this one's different. This one changed everything I thought I knew about family, about loyalty, and about what really matters when the rubber meets the road. See, I'm what you'd call a loner by choice. 45 years old, divorced, no kids, and that's exactly how I liked it. My CB handle's Lone Wolf tells you everything you need to know about how I roll. My rig's a 2018 Peterbilt 579, midnight blue with enough chrome to blind a state trooper at high noon. She's my home, my office, and my sanctuary all rolled into one beautiful machine. Now, I gotta be straight with you about something that's gonna matter later. My family, well, let's just say we ain't exactly what you'd call close. Haven't talked to most of them in years. My old man passed 5 years back, and I barely made it to the funeral. My mum, God rest her soul, always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Maybe she was right. But there was one family member I always had a soft spot for. My Uncle Earl Morrison, my daddy's younger brother. That man taught me how to drive stick shift in his beat-up Chevy when I was 14. Showed me how to read the weather by watching the clouds, how to spot a good truck stop from a bad one. Earl was the kind of man who'd give you his last dollar and the shirt off his back if you needed it. Thing is, I hadn't seen Uncle Earl in, must have been going on 8 years. Life gets in the way, you know. The road calls, the miles pile up, and before you know it, years have passed like mile markers in your rearview mirror. Last I heard, he was living with his son Tommy down in Tulsa. Tommy always was a piece of work, had that entitled attitude that made your skin crawl. But Earl seemed happy enough, so I figured everything was copacetic. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee black as crude oil, eggs over easy, and a load of medical equipment bound for Amarillo. Standard haul, nothing special. The dispatcher's voice crackled through my phone. "Jake, got a clean run for you. Oklahoma City to Amarillo, medical supplies. Keep it smooth, keep it legal, and get it there by Thursday." I fired up that Caterpillar engine, felt her rumble to life like a sleeping giant waking up, and pulled out onto I-40. Had no idea I was about to have an encounter that would shake me to my core. About 60 miles west of Oklahoma City, where I-40 splits off from the old Route 66, I decided to take the scenic route, call it nostalgia, call it stupidity. But sometimes a man needs to feel that original Mother Road beneath his wheels. The old highways got character. None of that sterile interstate nonsense, just pure American asphalt with stories to tell. The weather was turning nasty. Dark clouds rolling in from the west like a freight train, and my CB was crackling with chatter about storms ahead. "Breaker 19, this is Hammer Down heading eastbound. Y'all got some serious weather coming your way. Visibility's down to maybe a quarter mile in spots." I keyed my mic. "Thanks for the heads up, Hammer Down. This is Lone Wolf westbound on the old 66. I'll keep my eyes peeled." That's when I saw him. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Through the misty rain, about a half-mile ahead, there was this figure walking along the shoulder. Not hitchhiking, mind you, just walking, in the middle of nowhere with storm clouds gathering overhead like vultures. As I got closer, my heart started doing something funny in my chest. The figure was an old man, maybe 80 years old, wearing a faded blue jacket and leaning heavy on a wooden cane. Each step looked like it took everything he had. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. Something about the way he carried himself, the set of his shoulders, looked familiar. I downshifted and pulled over about 50 yards ahead of him, hazards blinking, grabbed my rain slicker and climbed down from the cab. The wind was picking up. carrying the smell of rain and something else, something that reminded me of my childhood, of Sunday dinners and fishing trips. "Sir, you all right?" I called out, jogging back toward him. When he looked up, I swear my heart stopped beating for a full 3 seconds. Those eyes, pale blue like winter sky, with crow's feet that spoke of a lifetime of laughter and hard work. I knew those eyes. "Uncle Earl," the words came out like a whisper, barely audible over the wind. He squinted at me through the rain, and then his face broke into a smile that was equal parts joy and heartbreak. Jake Morrison? Well, I'll be damned. But here's what hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. This wasn't the Uncle Earl I remembered. This man looked broken. His clothes were soaked through, his hands were shaking, and there was something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Fear. Deep, bone-deep fear. "Uncle Earl, what in the Sam Hill are you doing out here? Where's your car? Where's Tommy?" His face darkened at the mention of his son's name, and he looked away. That's a long story, nephew. A real long story. The first drops of serious rain started falling, and I knew we had maybe 10 minutes before this storm turned ugly. But looking at my uncle standing there in the middle of nowhere, I also knew that whatever brought him to this moment was about to change both our lives forever. Now, I gotta be honest with you folks, my first instinct wasn't to play the hero. 23 years on the road teaches you to mind your own business, keep your schedule, and avoid complications. Family drama? That's exactly the kind of mess I'd spent my whole adult life trying to avoid. "Uncle Earl, look," I said, glancing at my watch and then at the darkening sky. "I got a delivery deadline in Amarillo. Medical equipment. People's lives might depend on this stuff getting there on time. Can't I just call Tommy to come pick you up?" The moment those words left my mouth, I saw something die in his eyes. Uncle Earl's shoulders sagged like I'd just sucker-punched him, and he turned away from me, staring down that empty stretch of Route 66 like it held all the answers in the world. "Tommy," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Tommy's the reason I'm out here, Jake." The rain was coming down harder now, and I could hear thunder rumbling in the distance. My CB crackled with more storm warnings. "All drivers on Route 66 between Oklahoma City and Amarillo. We got severe weather moving in. Seek shelter immediately." I looked at my uncle, this 80-year-old man with a cane, soaked to the bone, standing in the middle of nowhere. And then I looked at my rig. That trailer full of medical equipment represented a clean paycheck, a good rating with the company, and no complications, just the way I liked it. "Uncle Earl, I can't just, I got responsibilities. This load's worth 12 grand to me, and if I'm late..." I trailed off, hearing how pathetic I sounded even to myself. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected as much. "I understand, nephew. You got your own life to live. Don't worry about this old fool. I'll figure something out." But as he started walking again, each step more labored than the last, something my mama used to say came flooding back to me. "Jake Morrison," she'd tell me when I was being particularly selfish as a kid, "there's gonna come a day when you have to choose between what's easy and what's right, and that choice is gonna define the kind of man you really are." I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, watching my uncle disappear into the rain and mist. 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. The smart play was to get back in my truck, call the local sheriff's department, and let them handle it. Keep my nose clean, my schedule intact, and my life uncomplicated. But then I remembered something else. Uncle Earl teaching me to drive stick in that old Chevy. "The clutch is like trust, Jake," he'd said. "You gotta know exactly when to let go and when to hold on." "Ah, hell," I muttered, and started jogging after him. Uncle Earl, wait up." When he turned around, there were tears mixing with the raindrops on his weathered cheeks. "Jake, come on, old man. Let's get you out of this storm. The medical equipment can wait an hour or two. Some things are more important than schedules." Getting Uncle Earl into the cab of my Peterbilt was like watching a piece of living history climb aboard. His hands shook as he gripped the grab rail, and I had to boost him up from behind. Once he was settled in the passenger seat, I cranked up the heat and grabbed a thermos of coffee from behind my sleeper. "Here, Uncle Earl, this'll warm you up some." He wrapped his gnarled fingers around that thermos like it was a lifeline, and for the first time since I'd found him, he looked me straight in the eye. "Jake, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen real careful. What I'm about to say, it ain't easy for an old man to admit. The storm was really picking up now, rain hammering the windshield like angry fists. I'd pulled into an old truck stop that had seen better days, probably hadn't been updated since the Carter administration, but it was shelter, and right now, that's all we needed. I'm listening, Uncle Earl." He took a sip of coffee, and I watched his hands steady up a little. "You remember when you were about 16, and your daddy was giving you grief about wanting to be a trucker instead of going to college?" I nodded. "How could I forget? Dad had called trucking a dead-end job for dead-end people. We'd had a screaming match that lasted 3 hours. Well, I pulled you aside that day and told you something. You remember what that was?" I thought back, and slowly it came to me. "You said that a man's worth isn't measured by his job title or his bank account. It's measured by how he treats people when nobody's watching." "That's right." Uncle Earl's voice got stronger, more like the man I remembered. "And I told you something else, too. I said that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when showing up is hard." He paused, staring out at the rain. "Jake, I've been living with Tommy and his wife for 3 years now. Ever since I had that stroke and couldn't take care of myself proper anymore. And I gotta tell you, son, they've been treating me like I'm already dead." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" "I mean, they took my Social Security checks, sold my truck, moved me into that little room in their basement like I was some kind of burden they had to tolerate. Tommy's wife, she'd forget to make me dinner some nights. They'd go on vacation and leave me alone for weeks with nothing but peanut butter sandwiches and whatever I could scrounge up." The anger started building in my chest like steam in a boiler. "Uncle Earl, why didn't you call somebody? Why didn't you call me?" He looked at me with those pale blue eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Shame. Because I was too proud, Jake. Too damn proud to admit that my own son was treating me like garbage, and too scared that maybe I deserved it. That's when I realized something that hit me like a lightning bolt. Uncle Earl wasn't just family in trouble. He was about to become my teacher. Right there in that beat-up truck stop, with rain pounding the roof like 1,000 angry hammers, I made a decision that would change everything. I reached for my CB radio and switched to Channel 19. "Breaker 19, this is Lone Wolf looking for any drivers heading eastbound toward Oklahoma City. Got a personal emergency here. Need someone to relay a message to my dispatcher." The radio crackled for a moment. Then a familiar voice came through. "Lone Wolf, this is Moondog. I'm about 20 miles east of your 20. What's your situation, good buddy?" Moondog was a veteran driver I'd known for years, solid as a rock and trustworthy as sunrise. "Moondog, I need you to call Hartwell Freight and tell them Jake Morrison's going to be delayed on that Amarillo run. Family emergency. Tell them I'll get their medical equipment there, but it might be Thursday night instead of Thursday afternoon." "Copy that, Lone Wolf. You need any other assistance?" I looked over at Uncle Earl, who was staring at me with something between hope and disbelief. "Negative, Moondog. Just need to take care of family business. Appreciate you, brother." 10-4. Family comes first. Moondog out. Uncle Earl's voice was barely a whisper. "Jake, you can't do this. That delivery's important. People need that equipment." "Uncle Earl," I said, turning to face him full on, "let me tell you something I learned the hard way. I spent so many years chasing miles and paychecks that I forgot what really matters. When my daddy died, you know what his last words to me were? He said he was proud of the driver I'd become, but disappointed in the son I'd stopped being." The old man's eyes filled up with tears. "Jake, no, let me finish. I made a promise to myself at his funeral that I wasn't gonna make that mistake again. And finding you out there on that highway, that ain't coincidence, Uncle Earl. That's the universe giving me a chance to do right by family." I fired up the Peterbilt and pulled back onto Route 66, but this time we weren't just heading west toward Amarillo. We were heading into something bigger, a reckoning that was 20 years overdue. Where are we going, nephew? First, we're going to get you some dry clothes and a hot meal. Then we're going to figure out exactly what's been happening with Tommy. And after that, I gripped the steering wheel tighter. After that, we're going to fix this mess once and for all. As we rolled through the storm, Uncle Earl started talking. Really talking. He told me about the little humiliations, how Tommy would forget to pick up his medications, how they'd eat dinner in front of him without offering him any, how they'd talk about him like he wasn't even there. The final straw was yesterday, he said, his voice getting stronger with each mile. Tommy told me they were putting me in a nursing home. Not asking, telling, said they'd already picked one out, and I was going whether I liked it or not. That's when I understood why he'd been walking down Route 66 in a rainstorm. He wasn't just running away, he was making his last stand. About 30 miles down the road, we pulled into Mel's Diner, one of those classic Route 66 joints that's been serving truckers and travelers since Eisenhower was president. The neon sign flickered in the rain, casting red and blue shadows across the parking lot. Inside, it was all chrome and vinyl, with a jukebox playing Hank Williams and the smell of coffee that could wake the dead. The waitress was a woman named Ruby, had to be pushing 70 herself, with silver hair piled high and eyes that had seen everything twice. She took one look at Uncle Earl and immediately went into grandmother mode. Honey, you look like you've been through a washing machine. Let me get you some hot soup and a dry towel. While Uncle Earl warmed up with Ruby's famous chicken and dumplings, I stepped outside to make some calls. First, I called my cousin Tommy. Hadn't talked to him in years, but I still had his number in my phone. Jake? Jake Morrison. Well, I'll be damned. What's the occasion? Tommy, I got your daddy here with me. Found him walking down Route 66 in the rain. What the hell's going on? The silence on the other end of the line lasted about 10 seconds too long. Oh, that. Yeah, Dad's been having some issues lately. Dementia, you know. Sometimes he just wanders off. We've been worried sick. But here's the thing about being a trucker for 23 years. You learn to spot a lie from a mile away. Tommy's voice had that slick, rehearsed quality that screams bullshit. Dementia? Tommy, I just spent an hour talking to him. His mind's sharp as a tack. He told me some real interesting stories about how y'all have been treating him. Another pause. Look, Jake, you don't understand the situation. Dad's been difficult. Really difficult. We're doing the best we can, but we got our own lives to live. We found him a nice place where he can get proper care. A nice place? You mean you're dumping him in some nursing home so you can get your hands on his house and his savings? Now wait just a damn minute. No, you wait. I'm bringing him back to Tulsa tomorrow, and we're going to have ourselves a little family meeting. And Tommy, you better have some real good explanations ready. I hung up before he could respond, and went back inside. Uncle Earl was looking better. Some color had returned to his cheeks, and Ruby had found him a dry flannel shirt from the lost and found. How'd it go with Tommy? He asked. About like I expected. He's spinning some story about you having dementia and wandering off. Uncle Earl's laugh was bitter as black coffee. Dementia, that's rich. I may be 80 years old, but I can still balance a checkbook better than most folks half my age. Ruby refilled our coffee cups and leaned in conspiratorially. You boys talking about family trouble? Honey, I've been serving coffee to folks with family trouble for 40 years. Let me tell you something. Blood don't make you family. Love makes you family, and sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who hurt you the most. She was right, and tomorrow we were going to find out just how deep that hurt really went. The next morning dawned clear and cold, like the storm had washed all the lies out of the air. We'd spent the night in my sleeper cab. Uncle Earl insisted he was comfortable enough, though I could hear him shifting around, trying to find a position that didn't hurt his old bones. As we rolled into Tulsa around 10 a.m., Uncle Earl got quieter and quieter. His hands started shaking again, and it wasn't from the cold. Jake, maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I should just go to that nursing home. Might be easier for everyone. I pulled into a truck stop about 5 miles from Tommy's house and shut down the engine. Uncle Earl, look at me. Really look at me. Those pale blue eyes met mine, and I saw a lifetime of disappointment and hurt swimming in them. You remember what you taught me about bullies when I was 12 years old, when that kid Bobby Henderson was picking on me at school? A small smile crept across his weathered face. I told you that bullies only have power if you give it to them. That's right. And you know what else you told me? You said that sometimes a man has to stand up and fight, even when he's scared. Especially when he's scared. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out something I'd been carrying for 15 years, a small digital recorder I use for keeping track of mileage and expenses. Uncle Earl, I want you to tell me everything, every detail about how they've been treating you, and I want you to say it loud and clear, because we're going to record every word. For the next hour, sitting in that truck cab, my uncle laid out a story that made my blood boil. How Tommy had convinced him to sign over power of attorney just for emergencies. How they'd gradually taken control of his finances, his medications, his entire life. How they'd isolated him from friends, telling people he was too sick for visitors. The worst part, Uncle Earl said, his voice breaking, was when I had that chest pain last month. I asked Tommy to take me to the hospital, and he said I was just being dramatic. Told me to take an aspirin and quit complaining. Turned out I'd had a mild heart attack. If Mrs. Patterson next door hadn't called the ambulance, that's when I knew we weren't just dealing with neglect. We were dealing with something much darker. Uncle Earl, what you're describing, that's elder abuse. That's a felony in Oklahoma. He nodded slowly. I know what it is, Jake, but who's gonna believe an 80-year-old man over his own son? Tommy's got a good job, a nice house, a respectable reputation in the community. I'm just a burden who's outlived his usefulness. As we pulled up to Tommy's house, a sprawling suburban McMansion in one of Tulsa's nicer neighborhoods, I could see the curtains twitch in the front window. They were watching for us. You ready for this, Uncle Earl? He straightened his shoulders and gripped his cane tighter. I've been ready for this conversation for 3 years, nephew. Let's go remind my son what family really means. Tommy's house was everything I'd expected. Perfectly manicured lawn, 3-car garage, and the kind of fake friendliness that money can buy, but character can't. Tommy himself came out to meet us before we even reached the front door. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, looking every inch the successful insurance salesman he'd become. Dad! There you are. We were so worried about you. He rushed over to Uncle Earl with arms outstretched, but I caught the flash of anger in his eyes when he looked at me. Hello, Tommy, Uncle Earl said quietly. No hug, no warmth, just acknowledgement. Tommy's wife, Linda, appeared in the doorway. She was all smiles and concern, but something about her reminded me of a snake I'd once seen on the side of the road. Beautiful, but deadly. Earl, honey, you gave us such a scare. Come inside, let me make you some tea. Actually, I said, stepping forward, I think we need to have a family meeting first. All cards on the table. Tommy's fake smile faltered. Jake, I appreciate you bringing Dad home, but this is really a family matter. I am family, Tommy, and from what Uncle Earl's told me, it's about time somebody in this family started acting like it. We went inside, and I have to admit, it was impressive. Marble countertops, leather furniture, big screen TV, all the trappings of success. But I noticed something else. There wasn't a single photograph of Uncle Earl anywhere. Not one. It was like he'd been erased from their lives already. So, I said, settling into an armchair across from Tommy and Linda, Uncle Earl's been telling me some interesting stories about his living situation here. Now hold on, Tommy started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. He's told me about missed meals, forgotten medications, and threats about nursing homes. He's told me about signing over power of attorney under false pretenses. And most interesting of all, he's told me about a mild heart attack that y'all decided wasn't worth a trip to the hospital. Linda's face went white. Tommy's went red. That's not how it happened, Tommy stammered. Dad gets confused sometimes. He exaggerates things. Do I, son? Uncle Earl's voice cut through the room like a blade. Do I exaggerate when I tell them about the nights you left me alone with no food? Do I exaggerate when I tell them about you selling my truck without asking? Do I exaggerate when I tell them about you threatening to have me declared incompetent if I didn't sign those papers? The silence in that room was deafening. Tommy and Linda exchanged glances, and I could practically see them calculating their next move. Look, Tommy said finally, maybe we haven't been perfect, but taking care of an elderly parent is hard, really hard. We're doing the best we can. That's when I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording I'd made in the truck. Uncle Earl's voice filled the room, clear and strong, detailing 3 years of systematic abuse and neglect. The best you can, I said. Tommy, what you've been doing isn't caregiving. It's elder abuse, and it stops today. The recording hit that living room like a bomb going off. Tommy's face went through about 6 different shades of red before settling on a sickly pale green. Linda just sat there with her mouth hanging open, looking like someone had slapped her with a wet fish. That's illegal, Tommy finally sputtered. You can't record someone without their consent. Actually, Tommy, Oklahoma's a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, which Uncle Earl did, it's perfectly legal and admissible in court. Uncle Earl stood up slowly, using his cane for support, but there was something different about him now. The defeated old man I'd found on Route 66 was gone. In his place stood someone I recognized from my childhood, the man who'd taught me to drive, who'd stood up to my father when he was being unreasonable, who'd never backed down from a fight when he knew he was right. Tommy, Uncle Earl said, his voice steady and strong, I want my truck title back. I want access to my own bank accounts, and I want the deed to my house, the house your mother and I paid for with 40 years of honest work. Dad, you can't be serious. You can't live alone anymore. You're 80 years old. I'm 80 years old, not dead, and I've got more sense in my little finger than you've shown in the last 3 years. Linda finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. Earl, you're being manipulated. Jake's filling your head with nonsense because he wants your money too. That's when I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Lady, I make 6 figures a year driving truck. I don't need Uncle Earl's money. What I need is to sleep at night, knowing I did right by the man who helped raise me. I pulled out my phone again. Now, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna return everything you've taken from Uncle Earl, every document, every bank card, every piece of property, and you're gonna do it today, or I'm gonna take this recording to the Tulsa County District Attorney's office, and we'll let them sort it out. Tommy was sweating now. You don't understand the legal complications. I understand plenty. I understand that elder abuse is a felony in Oklahoma. I understand that financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult can get you 5 to 10 years in state prison. And I understand that once this story hits the local news, insurance salesman abuses elderly father, your career's gonna be deader than roadkill on I-40. The fight went out of Tommy like air from a punctured tire. He slumped back in his chair and looked at his wife, who was already calculating damage control. Fine, he said quietly. Fine, I'll get his papers. While Tommy was upstairs gathering documents, Uncle Earl walked over to the mantelpiece where family photos were displayed. He picked up a picture of Tommy's graduation from college, a picture that included Uncle Earl, beaming with pride at his son's achievement. You know what the saddest part is, Jake? He said, staring at that photograph. I was so proud of him, so damn proud. I thought I'd raised a good man. He set the picture down and turned to me. But I was wrong about one thing. I did raise a good man, just not the one I thought. 2 hours later, we were loading Uncle Earl's belongings into my truck. It wasn't much. A suitcase of clothes, a box of photographs, his medications, and a manila envelope containing all his important documents. Tommy and Linda watched from the front porch like mourners at a funeral, which I guess in a way they were. They were mourning the easy money and free house they'd just lost. "Where will you go, Dad?" Tommy asked as we finished loading. For the first time all day, he sounded like he might actually care about the answer. Uncle Earl looked at his son for a long moment. "I'm going home, Tommy, to my own house, the one you've been renting out for the last 2 years without telling me." "Dad, I was saving that money for your care." "No, son, you were saving it for yourself. There's a difference." As we climbed into the cab of my Peterbilt, Uncle Earl was quiet for the first few miles. I could see him in my peripheral vision, staring out at the familiar streets of Tulsa, probably wondering how his life had gotten so far off track. "You okay, Uncle Earl?" He was quiet for another minute. Then he said something that surprised me. "You know what, Jake? I feel better than I have in 3 years. Scared as hell, but better." "Scared of what?" "Scared of being alone. Scared of not being able to take care of myself. Scared that maybe Tommy was right about some things." He paused, "but mostly scared that I waited too long to stand up for myself." We drove to Uncle Earl's house, a modest 2-story place in an older neighborhood where the trees were tall and the neighbors actually knew each other's names. The current tenants, a young couple with a baby, were surprisingly understanding when we explained the situation. They'd been month to month anyway, and they'd found a better place across town. "We always wondered why the landlord never wanted to meet in person," the young woman said as she handed over the keys. "Now it makes sense." That evening, as we sat on Uncle Earl's front porch, drinking coffee and watching the sun set over Tulsa, he asked me something I'd been dreading. "Jake, you can't stay here and babysit me forever. You got your own life, your own job. What happens when you leave?" I'd been thinking about that all day. "Well, Uncle Earl, here's what I'm thinking. I've been driving over the road for 23 years, seen every mile of highway between here and California more times than I can count. Maybe it's time I tried something different." "Like what?" "Like local runs, regional stuff. There's plenty of work around Tulsa, and it'd mean I could check on you regular, maybe even move back to Oklahoma permanently." Uncle Earl's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, you can't change your whole life for me." "I'm not changing it for you, Uncle Earl. I'm changing it for me. See, I learned something today. Family isn't just about showing up when it's convenient. It's about showing up when it matters, and you matter." 6 months later, I was pulling into Uncle Earl's driveway in my new truck, a smaller day cab perfect for regional runs. I'd kept my word about staying local, and it turned out to be the best decision I'd made in years. Sure, I was making a little less money, but I was sleeping in my own bed every night and having Sunday dinner with Uncle Earl every week. But this particular Sunday was different. As I walked up to the front porch, I could hear voices inside, multiple voices, including some I didn't recognize. Uncle Earl met me at the door with a grin wider than the Arkansas River. "Jake, perfect timing. Come meet some folks." Inside, Uncle Earl's living room was full of people. There was Mrs. Patterson from next door, a couple I didn't recognize who looked to be in their 70s, and sitting in Uncle Earl's favorite chair was a woman about his age, with silver hair and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. "Jake, I want you to meet some friends of mine. This is Harold and Betty Morrison. No relation, just coincidence on the name. They live 2 streets over. And this," he said, his cheeks actually turning pink, "is Dorothy Williams. We met at the senior center." Dorothy stood up and shook my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "So you're the famous nephew Earl's always talking about. He tells everyone how you saved his life." "I didn't save anybody's life," I said, feeling embarrassed. "I just did what family's supposed to do." "Exactly," Dorothy said, with a smile that lit up the whole room. "That's what makes it special." Over dinner, which Dorothy had helped cook, and which was about 10 times better than anything Uncle Earl had ever made, I learned that my uncle had become something of a local celebrity. Word had gotten around about what happened with Tommy, and it had inspired other elderly folks to stand up for themselves. Uncle Earl had started a support group at the senior center for people dealing with family problems. "You should see him in action," Harold said, cutting into his pot roast. Last week, he helped Mrs. Chen get her grandson to stop stealing her social security checks. Week before that, he convinced old Mr. Rodriguez to report his daughter for neglect. It's like he found his calling, Betty added. Earl's become the unofficial advocate for seniors who don't have anyone else to fight for them. After dinner, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Uncle Earl told me something that changed everything I thought I knew about that day on Route 66. Jake, I got a confession to make. That day you found me walking in the rain, I wasn't just running away from Tommy's house. What do you mean? I was walking to your house. Well, to where your house used to be before you started driving over the road. I was gonna ask you for help, but I didn't know how to find you. When you pulled over, it was like a miracle. I stared at him. You were looking for me. Son, I'd been praying for months that somehow, some way you'd come back into my life. And there you were, driving down Route 66 in that big truck like an answer to prayer. A year later, I was sitting in the same truck stop where this whole story began, but everything was different now. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was running towards something, toward home, toward family, toward a life that actually meant something. My CB radio crackled to life. Breaker 19, this is Moondog looking for Lone Wolf. You out there, good buddy? I picked up the mic. This is Lone Wolf. Go ahead, Moondog. Jake, I'm about 10 miles behind you on I-44. Heard through the grapevine that you're getting some kind of award today. That true? I laughed. Yeah, it's true. Oklahoma Senior Services is giving me some volunteer appreciation thing. Apparently helping Uncle Earl start that support group has made a bigger impact than I realized. Well, I'll be damned. From highway cowboy to community hero. Your uncle must be proud. He is. And Moondog, thanks for making that call to my dispatcher that day. If you hadn't covered for me, brother, that's what we do. We take care of our own. Always have, always will. As I pulled into the parking lot of the senior center, I could see Uncle Earl waiting for me by the front door. At 81, he was moving a little slower, but his mind was sharp as ever, and his spirit was stronger than it had been in years. Dorothy was with him. They'd been inseparable for the last 6 months, and I had a feeling there might be wedding bells in the near future. You ready for your big moment, nephew? Uncle Earl asked as I walked up. I'm ready for whatever comes next, I said, and I meant it. Inside, the ceremony was simple but meaningful. They talked about how our little family crisis had sparked a movement that was now helping seniors across 3 counties. They mentioned the hotline Uncle Earl had helped establish, the legal aid clinic that had been started, and the dozens of families that had been reunited or healed. But the real moment came afterward, when a woman I'd never met approached me with tears in her eyes. Mr. Morrison, I wanted to thank you. My father was in a situation similar to your uncle's. When he heard Earl's story, it gave him the courage to ask for help. You saved his life. As we drove home that evening, Uncle Earl riding shotgun in my truck like old times, he asked me something I'd been thinking about myself. Jake, you ever regret giving up the long haul? Ever miss those big cross-country runs? I thought about it for a moment, watching the familiar Oklahoma landscape roll by. You know what, Uncle Earl? I spent 23 years driving all over this country looking for something I couldn't name. Turns out what I was looking for was right here all along. What's that? Home, family, purpose, the chance to make a real difference in someone's life. Uncle Earl nodded and smiled. Funny how sometimes you have to travel thousands of miles to find what's been waiting for you right down the road. And as we pulled into his driveway, with Dorothy's car already parked there and the porch light glowing warm and welcoming, I realized he was absolutely right. Sometimes the longest journey is the one that brings you home.